Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do some disassembly and maintenance on this little guy right here. This is the Hogue Knives and HK Micro Incursion. So this is a out-the-front automatic double-action knife. What that means is that in order to open the knife, you press this button this way, knife comes open. In order to close the knife, you pull it back, knife comes closed. Right? A single-action automatic would... you press the button and then it deploys, but then you have to do something else. You like pull a lever or something like that. This guy only has, well, it's double action. So we're going to go on ahead and take this guy apart. The very first step that I'm going to take when I do that is I'm actually going to try and get the blade off the rails, basically. I think this is the way this knife works. Yeah, okay, good. So this works like, it seems, any other double action out the front knife, meaning that there is some degree of safety. There is a measure of safety involved. I'm going to hold this guy up against this card. This is just a little thick card with instructions for a watch, but my goal is to push this out, and what you're going to see is it doesn't actually come flying through the card. Instead, what it does is it brings the blade off the rails in a state where if I pull back, nothing happens, and I push forward, nothing happens. If that happens to your knife, by the way, it's no problem. You just pull it all the way out, and then it'll come back in as normal. But this is actually a useful thing to do as you're starting this process, because what this does is it means that there is no longer any spring tension here, right? There's not a spring that's in place. The blade is just kind of floating in there. And it'll make more sense why that's the case later on, but this should put me in a place where I can take this apart with no concern. Looks like T8 on the outside here. And this will also be a nice little way for you to see how a double-action automatic can work. I'll go ahead and I will take the screws out here, and I'm putting them in places on my mat here, such that I know where they live. This is actually, well, I'm hoping this is going to be pretty straightforward. Double actions seem really intimidating at first. Oh yeah, this is the same damn idea as always. They seem very intimidating at first for disassembly, but they're really actually not, right? So here's how this guy works. I'm going to see if I can show you this sort of naturally. What you've got here is this set of springs in the middle here. And when I pull this guy fully, oh, okay, this guy popped loose because there's no top plate on it, right? So as a result, I need to make sure that this is going where it needs to go. But what you're going to see is this part right here. This little lever is what keeps the knife open, right? And so when that gets disengaged, the knife can pop back in. And then similarly, this little lever here keeps the knife closed. When I don't have this little, when this little plate isn't sliding and moving this plate, because when this slides back and forth, what you're going to see is that it will actually... it disengages this bottom plate here. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. When I pull this little cassette forward, it moves this lever out of the way such that the blade can come flying open, right? Now the blade is able to move in this direction. And similarly, if I take this guy out, now the knife is locked open. If I pull on this little lever pack, which will be in this position, it will disengage this lever, allowing the knife to slide back in. But you might be asking, okay, Nick, that makes sense. But how the heck is the knife supposed to, why does it fly in and out? Where's the tension come? Where's the spring? Well, that's this little guy right here. What we see is there's this pair of springs. Whoop, there. There's this little pair of springs. And on the bottom is this very important little bit of tabbery, right? There's a tab here and there's a tab here. And that tab interacts with the blade on both ends of the process, right? It's probably easiest to see if I pull it out this way. What you see is that right now, this little thing can't slide any further forward, right? And so because of this little curvature here, it's going to want to try and pop out. So I might not be able to do this demonstration. But at this point in time, there is actually now a fair amount of spring tension that is trying to pull this blade back in. When I pull the whole situation back, when I pull this little guy back, that spring tension is released by virtue of, basically when this lever lifts, that spring tension is going to pull on that little dot on the blade and make it fly back in there, right? It's going to go back in that direction. Now I'm going to try and undo all this without hurting myself. How do I do that? Probably by releasing this lever while holding onto the blade. So I'm going to release the lever here using, this is never an issue unless you're doing it wrong. There we go. Okay, so now the blade can fall off and the spring is now back on this guy again as it wants to be. But anyways, so basically when this guy is closed, then this spring will become extended when the knife is fully open, and then this spring will become extended on this side when the knife is fully closed, and in both cases, it will apply force when it's closed in this direction and when it's open on this direction. And when you release these little levers, the blade will, that force will force the blade to go whoop or whoop, right? It's really... It's one of those mechanisms that feels like it should be very complicated, but is actually quite simple, right? I am actually quite... I think it's really neat. I'm just going to be real with you there. So there is also not all that much that you can do with them maintenance-wise, right? There's really not a lot of reason to do all of this. After a while, it might become useful. But in terms of, like, pulling out the blade, I'm not actually 100% sure how you would pull the blade out all the way, unless there's another catch that the back of this is pressing on. It may be, actually... Oh, hold on. That's it. Look at this. There's a little post in there. That's the thing that the bottom of that this little spring thing touches. Here, I'll zoom back out. You pull that post out. Now the blade comes the rest of the way out. You can get in there and fully... This is nice. This is really, really nicely done. Look, it's a very... I say this with, you know, respect and appreciation. This is a very basic double action out the front sort of system, but it works well. It's a good approach. And they've done it well, and they've made it very easy to maintain. So I can come in here, I can clean this, and also get in here. This is a little microfiber swab from Knife Pivot Lube. And I can just kind of run this along the bottom of the whole thing and just clean off anything that's on the outside there. But honestly, this is very straightforward. Nice. Very, very nice. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to apply a little bit of lubrication to the bottom of this lever here, because that's going to be rubbing against the knife. I'm going to apply a little lubrication to this lever here, because again, that's going to be rubbing against the knife. I'm going to put a little bit along the bottom, like along the rails basically here. That should help lubricate some things. And then I will just sort of apply, and again, I'm Exxon Shabazzing here. A little too much, but I'll apply a little tiny bit to the back side here that will naturally spread itself out over the interior as we're doing this. And now I can put this guy in, because see, when we put this little thing in, the blade stops itself right there. Okay, so I put the blade back in, and I'm going to go on ahead and I'm going to open this lever here. That will allow the blade to slide back in, and if there was spring tension, it would pull all the way in. That's, by the way, in case you didn't hear. But anyways, and then I'll drop this in place. So now the blade is sort of stuck in position. Next thing I'm going to do is, by the way, this is just held on by friction, basically. There's not, there's no, like, fastener keeping that on there. So I can get on here and I can do a little bit of very light lubrication on this whole affair here. Put that there. But anyways, and so actually now we can see very well, without that spring on there, exactly here. If this is closed, pushing it back this way will open this one. If it's open, then this will allow it to fire off. Nice. Then what I can do is I can put a little bit of lubricity right on the top here. Again, that'll just help this guy. By the way, I'm using 10-weight nano oil. And I think I did my nickshabazz.com/tools plug, but that's a thing. You need to know my tools. So now I just snap this back on together. Probably should be doing this with the, yeah, there we go. Takes the tension out of the system. So now, at this point in time, what I can do is, the very last thing that you want to keep in mind is that there is actually a little cutout here. This is not a, let's see if I can show that. There's a little tiny pocket right here on this area, and same thing over here. So you don't want to put the button on last. You want to make sure that this button is mounted on this handle here. And you want to make sure that it's oriented properly, because see, there's a little, basically, hole for it. But you need to make sure that the button is put in there before you put this other side on. Otherwise, you can't get it in afterwards. But once So, okay, see, by doing that, this is a teachable moment. Now that this is back together, I can't slide this in there. In fact, what I need to do is open this up slightly. Now I can do it. So now, at this point in time, with everything held closed, basically, the knife should be fully operational. So I can do this, and I can do this, and the knife is working great. So now all I need to do is reinsert the screws. God, this is straightforward. Oh, nice. Well done. Again, I say that not because this is so markedly different from any other, but it's very easy to screw things up, right? To make things unintentionally harder than they need to be. But this is very serviceable, right? This is part of the reason why I tend to prefer to support companies that use, straightforward. And again, I'm going to take some tension off the system here. Just get the blade off the rail there. But this is part of the reason I tend to support companies that use straightforward screws and things like that, and that aren't concerned about you servicing these things because they're not so damn hard to service, right? They work. They're well designed. There's not a problem. So I am a big fan of the fact that they not only is this possible, but doesn't void your warranty anymore. Hogue has fixed that, and thus for HK. This is nice. This is very nice. And if nothing else, as a reviewer, speaking quite frankly, as a California resident, out-the-front automatics are there are relatively few options, especially with decent screws on them. And this will stick around for me, maybe not as a part of my personal collection. I don't know how much pocket time it'll get. I haven't carried it really yet. But it will stick around as an example of an out-the-front automatic. And this one is going to be legal where I'm at, so there's no complaints about that. Like that. But so far, this has been a very nice disassembly. Honestly, if I weren't, yammering on about it, I could have been done with this in 3 minutes, right? But nice. Okay. It's always nice when a disassembly that you've been, I don't know about dreading, but just like, this is going to be more involved. It turns out to be just like easy street, right? Okay, last step is I'm going to pull the blade out and get that seated. Now the spring's under tension, so when I unlock that lever, it's going to fly back in. Similarly, when I press in this direction, unlock the lever, it's going to fly back out, in, out. And actually, the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply a little tiny bit of lubrication to this surface here, such that that'll spread itself out onto any contact surfaces. Snickety snick. Beautiful. That is all set and all done. So, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Keep an eye out for the full review of this guy coming up soon.